I'm a long-time lurker, first-time poster. Thought I'd need to share this story here since I've never posted anything. About 7 years ago when I was 17, my parents went out of town for a weekend and left me home. This was a pretty common occurrence. My parents trusted me. I would usually spend these weekends away staying with friends or family, as my parents' house is a bit too creepy to be alone in, even during the day. We live in a small rural town where everybody knows each other, and generally it's a pretty quiet place. It's also quite safe. Saturday I was supposed to stay with a friend, but her parents decided last minute to not let me stay. It wasn't a big deal that I had to leave. I was somewhat prepared to have to go home because her parents got weird about company sometimes. I left her house, which is about 15 minutes away from my parents' house, around 9:30 or 9:45. While I was on the way home, I got a weird feeling that I can't really explain. I just knew that I didn't want to stay at my parents' while home alone. I called my brother and asked if I could stay with him. At the time, he was living with a woman who had a small child. He told me it would be quieter and easier for him just to come stay with me, since his dog would bark if I tried to come in the house. He said he would be at our parents' in 20 minutes. Side note, that's relative later. My brother's a relatively scared looking guy. He's about 6'3" and 200 pounds. Pretty muscular and covered in tattoos. After hanging up, I decided to stop at a gas station to grab a snack before going home, so that my brother would be there when I got there. I pulled into the gas station. There were only a few cars in the lot, which was typical because this is a small town in a rural south where everything is pretty much stopped after 8 p.m. I parked and walked up to the door. There was a man standing outside the door smoking. He opened the door for me without saying anything. This is a normal southern hospitality, especially since I'm female. I smiled and thanked him. Inside, there's another man standing by the door. I noticed him staring at me as soon as I came in. I gave him that gross up and down look, and he said something creepy to the effect of, "Hey sexy, what are you doing alone?" Creepy as fuck. I just ignored him and walked towards the back of the store. He yelled after me and called me a bitch. I ignored him. I figured he was drunk or high or just an asshole. Most people around here talk big game but rarely back it up. I wasn't scared, just annoyed. I got my snacks and paid at the counter. When I walked back to the door, both the men were gone. I was happy I wouldn't have to deal with any more catcalling. I began walking across the lot towards my car, which was probably about 100 feet away from the door. As I was walking, I looked down at my phone to see if enough time had passed for my brother to be at my parents'. When I look up, the asshole who hit on me was standing at the pump staring. I looked at him for a second and continued walking. "Hey you know you're supposed to answer a man when he speaks to you," he said. I remember saying something snarky back to him. Getting in my car, he looked pissed at my sarcasm. I locked my doors as soon as I got in the car and started it, and was thinking of nothing but getting home to eat my snacks and hang out with my brother. I put my car in gear and realized the man had disappeared. I looked around before pulling out of my parking spot, only to realize that both men were sitting in the car facing mine across the lot. They were both staring at me and talking, occasionally even pointing towards me. I just stared at them, defiant and pissed. I didn't want them to think they scared me at all. While we were sitting having our staring contest, the man who had opened the door for me smiled and gave me the finger across the throat gesture, as in, "You're dead." I rolled my eyes and pulled out of the gas station. To my dismay, they pulled out behind me. I hadn't been scared until this point, because, as I said, most people hear a lot of talk, no follow through. Instead of going home, I took a few back roads that connect back in sort of a circle to see if they were really following me, which of course they were. When they realized I was testing them, they drove up really close to me and started laying on the horn. I could see the headlights, they were so close. I called my brother and told him what was going on. He told me to come home and that he would handle it. I started driving home and the two assholes were still following me. They were riding my ass and blowing their horn. Even with my detours, I was only about 3 to 4 minutes away from my parents' house. I slowed down to pull in the driveway and was immediately relieved. At the end of the driveway, my brother was standing shirtless, with his shoulders back, hands crossed, in front of his stomach, clearly holding a pistol. His intimidating looking pit bull sitting by his side. I drove around him into the yard. The two guys actually started to pull behind me until they saw my brother. Then they hightailed it out of there. I have no idea what they would have done if I had stopped somewhere alone or kept driving. I always think fondly of that image of him standing there like a badass. I'm thankful he was there. The story came out of nowhere. I truly wasn't expecting any of this. I've had creepy people and weird things happen, but generally speaking, I'm aware of my surroundings and don't have many issues. I had just broken up with a boyfriend, moved back home for the summer until school was starting back up. I got full-time work at the 7-Eleven gas station a mile away from my parents' house and goofed off with my hometown friends. That was my summer plan, and things were going quite well for the first month. I never really realized how many creeps came into the gas station, and we were in a fairly nice suburb area. We of course had our regulars, and one of them was a late 30s guy who started to intentionally wait in my longer line to be checked out by me and various things like that. Looking back, it was a bit obvious. A 21-year-old girl that, due to a previous abusive relationship, did not see myself as fairly attractive. I just thought these guys were really friendly and nice. So first he starts only coming to my register, then suddenly I would see him a few times a shift. I noticed he would always seem very polite, well-mannered, never really giving out any skeeky vibes. He had a couple of tween daughters that would be with him here and there, which made him seem more harmless to me. Generally, I would work the early morning shifts, but flip to later shifts as I've been a night owl, getting maybe a couple hours of sleep before I had to go in. When that happened, this creep was upset with me because he wasn't able to come in to see me because he worked a second shift. At this point, I was actively avoiding him, stalking the Kohler if I saw him pull up and stuff like that. He started to show up when I would get off work, and I would delay myself until he left. Then I started getting notes and flowers on my car, until one night, I'm walking out to my vehicle, and he popped up from behind it. I backed up and told him that I was not interested at all. He assured me that he would woo me to change my mind. I switched schedules, working nights, days, mornings, all over the place, so that my schedule wasn't predictable. I'm working one afternoon when comes this batshit crazy woman with 2 younger girls. So she starts asking her daughters, "Is this the girl?" To which they replied yes. Maniac woman screams and threatens me to stay away from her husband, and I'm like, "Whoa lady, I have no idea who you're talking about." Apparently the psycho stalker man is married and had been telling his wife he has a younger hot gas station girlfriend that's moving in and blah blah blah. This lady is nuts. Her daughters looked super embarrassed, and she was not leaving the gas station. The store owner watched on video from the back and called the cops, and the lady was told to leave. At the time, I was dating and going out on a few dates, and this one handsome guy started coming up to make sure when I left at night that the guy wasn't gonna pop out again. Normally at nights, we had 2 people, but the other girl had called in. I have no idea how the creepy stalker man noticed, but he slipped in 10 minutes to close and said he just wanted to, quote, keep me company while I was doing nightly closing activities. He was making weird comments about how no girl should be left here alone late at night like this. Why won't I give him a chance? He will move me in, buy me a car, and all kind of creepy things. I told him no thank you, your wife wasn't too keen on this either. This guy flew into a rage, knocked over a display, and started screaming at me, "What did you tell her?" All crazy man style. At this point, I'm trapped inside a gas station after close, but I don't dare go out to the parking lot where I parked my car. It is off to the side at the back of the store. It's dark and obviously my stalker friend will follow. Thank goodness my guy I was seeing happened to be coming home from work and noticed my car was still at the gas station and came to check on me. As soon as he came to the door, he could see my panic and took creeper storming away into the night. He helped pick up the display mess, sat with me until I stopped shaking and encouraged me to quit the gas station pronto. We called the police. It's a small town, and he was easily found with his white Kia driving erratically. The officer followed up with me. He had a knife, rope, and duct tape. Creepy married gas station stalker, let's not meet again. I was reading over some of these stories here, and after a while of debating, I decided to make an account so I could share my own experiences. It was the middle of the night, maybe 12 or 1 in the morning, and I had snuck out to get a bag of chips or something from the gas station a few blocks away from my house. It was in the middle of December, and it was snowing pretty heavily outside. For the record, I was 14 or 15 at the time. I've always been pretty small, at about 5'4" in height and 115 pounds in weight. I'm female, but I've always had short hair and kind of a boyish face. The gas station was completely empty, besides a woman behind the cash register, who I remember being far too busy filing her nails than to pay any attention. I had been picking through some of the chip bags to find something good when I heard the ding of the door as someone entered the small gas station. I didn't bother to look to see who it is. When I finally turned, I found what I was looking for. I turned and headed towards the refrigerated section for a drink, before seeing the person who had just walked through the door. It was a tall, thin man, maybe 6'2" with brown hair, a red trucker hat, and a short, scruffy beard. He looked like he was in his late 30s or early 40s. I was surprised that I didn't recognize the man. I lived in a small mountain town, and everyone kinda knew everyone. Oddly enough, he was wearing a short-sleeved t-shirt and shorts, despite it being freezing cold outside. His shirts and pants were covered in grass stains, as if he had just been working on a lawn or something. He turned to me and smiled, a toothy grin, before moving from the door to the refrigerated area so that I could grab what I needed. I know I shouldn't have seen anything wrong with this, but something about the grin and the way his eyes looked me over already kind of was a red flag. I've been a very nervous and paranoid person my whole life. I moved in and opened the door, quickly grabbing a drink and backing off. Before I could turn away, I heard the man's raspy voice as he spoke to me. "Hey, you look familiar," the man said. He had somewhat of a southern accent, which wasn't all that uncommon considering where I lived. Yeah, I responded, not sure what to say to him. He introduced himself as Thomas, before leaning against the door. "What is a young man like you doing out here so late?" he asked. Again, I wasn't sure what to say. I wasn't a boy, for one, but I didn't bother to correct him. I was just getting a snack," I responded, trying to inch my way away from him, trying to give off the hint that I don't want to be talked to. Yet the man just trailed behind me. "Do you know my daughter?" he asked, cutting me off in the aisles. "Well, who is your daughter?" I asked shakily in response. The man frowned at me, his eyes narrowing in my direction. He refused to tell me her name, claiming that he didn't want boys touching her daughter. I was confused by the sudden change of mood, so I didn't say anything else. I started making my way towards the register before he cut me off again. "Do you need a ride? It's cold out there," he said, getting uncomfortably close. At this point, I could smell the alcohol in Thomas's breath. It made me very uncomfortable. "No, thank you," I said, trying to move around him. He insisted, and yet again, I refused. I moved to try to push past him, bumping into a metal shelf. A can of chips fell off the shelf, hitting the floor. The lady behind the register looked up from what she was doing, noticed me and the man. "Are you ready to check out?" she asked, glaring at Thomas. I nodded, and the man moved out of my way. I paid for the chips and drink before thanking the woman and moving out of the gas station, but it didn't end there. When I began my walk down the snowy road, I saw the man get into his truck before getting out a minute later. I was already quite a ways away when he began walking the same direction I was. I would have called for someone to help at this point, but I didn't have a phone at the time. I'd quickened my pace and eventually he turned around and went home. I don't want to think about what would have happened if the man would have kept following me. So Thomas, I don't think we should meet again.